Hey guys, welcome to this edition of Rail Reading with PJ. Today we're going to read about the SP 4449, the American Freedom Train, in the July 2002 edition of Railfan and Railroad. Here we go. SP 4449 shows her true colors. How important are railroad color schemes these days anyway? While that question still garners some debate among rail fans discussing it, their favorite short line or mainline road, it takes on an entirely different importance when applied to Southern Pacific 484 number 4449. Arguably the most photographed locomotive in the world, the 4449 has worn a daylight paint scheme for more years in restored service than she ever did in her original revenue days with the SP. Long before her retirement in 1956, the 4449 had lost not only her daylight paint but also her skirting that carried the famous orange, black, and red scheme of her daylight passenger trains. During her years on display at Oaks Park in Portland, Oregon, 4449 wore a simple black paint scheme, which represented her final years in freight service. In 1974, when she was pulled from the park to be restored for service on the American Freedom Train, a red, white, and blue paint scheme was developed in keeping with the bicentennial celebration to which she was devoted. While pleased to see the 1941 Lima 484 back in service, the railfan community of the mid-1970s showed only passing interest in the bicentennial paint motif adorning the Daylight locomotive. In 1981, when the famous GS4 was invited to participate in the opening of the California State Railroad Museum, it seemed most appropriate to retain her to the famous Daylight paint scheme that she had worn during the heyday of passenger service in the Golden State. The application of this beautiful paint scheme to the 4449 was met with overwhelming approval and adoration by the railfan community. Purists and novices alike felt this would be the only paint scheme the 4449 should wear throughout the balance of her lifetime. For nearly 20 years, they were right. SP 4449 operates today thanks to the dedicated efforts of a large number of volunteers on her crew headed by engineer Doyle McCormick. However, even the hard work of these volunteers is not enough by itself to be able to enable the 4449 to operate for the benefit of the public's enjoyment. Additional assistance is required from mainline railroads for her to operate in the fashion to which she was designed. For the past several years, the 4449 has operated thanks to the generous cooperation of the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railroad, with efforts spearheaded by BNSF Executive Vice President Roland Brandenburg. In 2000, when Mr. Brandenburg asked Doyle McCormick to use the 4449 on a series of BNSF employee appreciation trips, the subject of 4449's paint scheme came up. Since BNSF would be underwriting these trips for the benefit of its employees, the railroad understandably wanted its name applied to the locomotive pulling the employee specials. It was decided that a simple black paint scheme with BNSF heralds applied would be the best means of broadcasting BNSF's company name to the communities that the employee trips would pass through. The decision to apply a black paint scheme over the much adorned red, orange, and black daylight scheme was met with some dismay among the railfan community. Many fans could not understand how history could repeat itself, and the beautiful daylight scheme again covered with a simple black paint job. McCormick and crew were quick to point out that honoring the BNSF request for this paint scheme was small thanks for their cooperation in allowing the 484 to run over their system. For nearly 2 years, the 4449 wore with distinction her black paint scheme, still to the frustration of many rail fans. In early 2002, the 4449 crew learned their insurance premiums would double, commencing April 1st, a decision made to operate another passenger excursion with 4449s before the insurance premiums increased. The Columbia Day Shirt Special was announced between Portland and Bend, Oregon, for the weekend of March 23rd and 24th. Contemporaneous with the announcement of the excursion, word leaked out from the Brooklyn Roundhouse that SP 4449 would receive a new paint scheme for the trip. Rail fans immediately began speculating over internet chat lines, coffee room discussions, and elsewhere that 4449 would finally be returned to orange, black, and red. For the weeks leading up to the Bend excursion, several internet chat lines contained various postings from rail fans asking for confirmation from McCormick and crew that the 4449 would be returned to her famous daylight paint scheme. These inquiries were met only with subtle and sometimes vague confirmation that the engine was in fact being repainted. While some fans speculated openly on what the paint scheme would be, others were quick to jump in and insist that the engine could only be repainted to the daylight paint scheme she had worn for nearly 20 years of her restored life. Those of us on the 4449 crew watched with amusement the speculation by so-called experts considering the paint scheme to be applied to the locomotive. The fans were correct that the decision had been made in late 2001 to repaint the daylight locomotive. It was felt that she had worn her black paint scheme long enough. However, the events of September 11, 2001 had a profound impact on the decision. The wave of national patriotism that swept the country after the events of September 11 were not lost on the management of America's railroads. Almost immediately following the terrorist attack on New York, railroad employees began hanging flags on their locomotives. Union Pacific went so far as to apply large flag decals to their newly delivered diesels. The 4449's excursion would once again require the cooperation of BNSF to allow the 484 to operate on its track down the Columbia Gorge and then over the Oregon Trunk to Bend. During their planned discussions for the trip, Roland Brandenburg mentioned to Doyle McCormick how it would be appropriate for the 4449 to project the patriotic theme. Given 4449's heritage of carrying the red, white, and blue colors throughout the United States in celebration of its country's 200th anniversary, it seemed most appropriate that the 4449 be returned to her American Freedom Train colors for this trip to Bend. Mr. Brandenburg and his people at BNSF heartily agreed with the decision that the 4449 return as the ultimate rolling demonstration of American patriotism. In the weeks leading up to the excursion trip, no mention was made publicly by the 4449 crew as to what colors the engine would be painted. The advertisement for the trip on the 4449 webpage said nothing of the engine's new paint scheme. However, a subtle hint was presented by the posting of the 4449 webpage of a photo of the engine in American Freedom Train colors. Even this went unnoticed by most, if not all, rail fans, who were still speculating that the engine would obviously be returned to a daylight paint scheme The trip to Bend sold out in just a matter of weeks, long before the actual paint scheme was revealed or made completed. Interesting. Further hints were made by the 4449 crew when they posted pictures on the internet showing the engine being sanded down in preparation for a new paint job. Some of these photos showed that the engine had been sanded down to the American Freedom Train red, white, and blue colors. Even these hints were missed by most. Only 3 weeks prior to the trip, when the first base coat of white was being applied to the engine, did the crew confirm that the 484 would reprise her role as American Freedom Train 4449. Somewhat to the surprise of the 4449 crew, the Railfan community met this starting announcement with overwhelming support, with many fans joining in the national sense of patriotism by applying American flags to their vehicles and houses. It seemed appropriate that this most popular of steam locomotives also be adorned with the colors of our national pride. The response by the general public to the 4449's red, white, and blue paint was also one of overwhelming support. Local and national news programs broadcast segments showing the engine in our new patriotic colors. All along our route from Portland to Bend, we were met by local citizens waving American flags and banners of all kinds. When passing through the farming areas of Metolius and Culver, groups of local citizens appeared in the fields along the tracks holding large American flags and other banners. Whew. On our return from Bend to Portland, many houses and other buildings that had been bearing of flags the day before were now adorned with large flags and banners facing toward the tracks for all the passengers to see. The number of fans motorcading the sold out excursion was actually larger than on previous trips. Many admitted that they were thrilled to see the engine in AFT colors, since many had missed photographing her in these colors 25 years earlier. The Friends of the 4449 Inc. experienced brisk sales of the patriotic hats, shirts, and jackets developed for this trip, thanks to both the volunteers on the 4449 crew and Mr. Brandenburg and his BNSF employees. The trip from Portland to Bend and back was very successful. With the engine back in our roundhouse, plans are already being discussed for our next public outing. How long will she continue to wear her red, white, and blue paint scheme is yet to be seen. What's in a paint scheme, you ask? When it comes to the 4449, the paint scheme can mean everything. Cool. I always like that train. It's pretty nice. The red, white, and blue. Yeah, looks pretty sharp. Hmm. And here's some pictures. Let's roll. Well, cool. I always like that. Like I said, pretty nice locomotive. Well, that's all for the show for today. Join me next time when we explore another article. Bye.